All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Secret Formula of Femininity podcast. I am so happy to be here again today with another exciting topic and a special guest. I've been kind of hinting at this for a while, and I've finally been able to get her on my podcast. So, we are going to be having an amazing conversation today, and I want to introduce to you Chantal Blake. I know her well. She's a sister, she's a friend, and she's an amazing educator. Let me just kind of formally tell you who she is. So, Chantal Blake is a holistic menstrual health educator and writer with a professional background in nursing, environmental engineering, and Peristeam Hypnotherapy, which I have benefited from myself. She weaves the fields of medicine, environmentalism, and holistic self care into fascinating and practical instruction for women of all ages. And this is something really exciting about Chantal. She wrote an amazing book called Peaceful Periods Holistic Womb Care for Teens, and it is now available for pre order. It's at honorwomb.com. I'll make sure that it's in the show notes and it's on pre order, but it's officially launching on September 20th. And we are going to get into this book, why she thought it was important, and why we all need to be take more control and have understanding of that part of our womanhood, our menstrual cycle and our periods. So welcome, Chantel. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the channel. I'm so happy
Thank
to have
you. Thank you so much. And my greetings to your beautiful community. I've been watching your community grow. And so I'm so excited that you are really gathering such a powerful group of women who are so ready to step forward into leadership in a feminine and an embodied way. So it's so exciting to be here.
Yes, yes. And you said a key word, embodied, right? And I think that is a lot of what you capture with your diverse background in so many different fields. But the work that you're doing now ties directly to women and our bodies. Could you just share a little bit about like what exactly you do, how you empower women, and what you educate women
Yeah. So, in short, I often say I help women break cycles of hormonal chaos and painful periods. It's something so common that we think it's an inherent part of being a woman. But that wouldn't be true if we can see that pain and that imbalance undone with intentional self care, with the right information and lifestyle support. So people are often introduced to being a woman as it's painful, you have a period, it's difficult, it's just going to be this burden you have to carry throughout your life, and you need to succeed and overcome in spite of it. And so, a big part of what I educate women about is how their period is an ally to them living their best life, an ally to your dreams, an ally to your success, an ally to you fully experiencing everything that having a menstrual cycle offers, because your menstrual cycle is not just the days that you bleed. Your entire month is a symphony of hormonal shifts that shape so many aspects of our body. And so many of us, we think, okay, my menstrual cycle just affects if I have a period, what it's like, and if I'm having a baby or if I'm fertile. But your menstrual cycle also impacts your mental focus, your mood, your energy level, your immune system, your digestion, your metabolism, your libido. Like, all of these aspects of your life are impacted by your menstrual cycle. So I spend a lot of my time helping women connect the dots with how their period is showing indication of balance or imbalance, health or lack of health, on a monthly basis. And then I help them to bring their periods and hormones into better harmony with just living your life and going through each of the phases with awareness and an understanding of what's actually shifting in your body, so you don't keep trying to override what your body is calling you to lean into.
Wow. I mean, you said a mouthful right there, right? And something that stood out for me is the whole idea of understanding that your menstrual cycle and is so much more than just that 5 to 7 days of your period. or understanding it is much more than just knowing when you're fertile and going to get pregnant. Could you say more about that? Like how you even came to understand that, for example, your menstrual cycle connects to your mental focus and your digestion and your mood. Like how did you even, because I think this is information that not a lot of women know or deeply understand. So tell us about how you came to have this understanding and what are some key things women need to know about that?
Yeah, for me personally, the challenge or the opportunity, right, that presented itself for me to better understand this was um, I had already had my first child at this point, and I was having difficulty keeping pregnancies. I was having early pregnancy release, and I thought I'm a pretty healthy person. I eat well, I manage my weight. I try to live an overall healthy lifestyle. And so why are my hormones not supporting what they're designed to do, right? Regardless if we want a child or not, our bodies as female physiology, it's still designed to reproduce.
Mhm.
And so everything that's happening with our hormonal cycle is evidently working when reproduction happens, when we want it to happen, right? When we're able to conceive at the time we want to conceive. And I was really struggling with what's going on. I think I'm healthy. Why am I not keeping my pregnancies? And so for me, the dive was into understanding, just learning about my menstrual cycle for the first time, learning what a healthy period is, learning that what do irregular periods tell me? What do painful periods tell me? What do heavy bleeding and clotting? What do these symptoms? What is the body communicating through all of these symptoms? And so I started diving into the work of Elisa Vitti, who's a hormonal, like functional medicine practitioner, and she helps thousands of women around the world through her books, through her courses, and her content. Just understand that you are not a little man. You are a woman. You
Yeah.
have female physiology. You're not designed to function the way that men do. Men have a 24-hour hormonal clock. It resets and repeats pretty consistently on a daily basis. However, when we start to menstruate, we also have a month-long clock. So we have our daily circadian rhythm that tells us when to be wakeful and when to be restful every day. It's impacted by our exposure to natural sunlight, and our exposure to artificial light, and impacts our circadian, like our daily rhythm of wakefulness and sleep. But our monthly clock starts when we start to menstruate. And it takes us on a month-long journey, much like a moon phase, right? Or a moon cycle. It takes us on this month-long journey where these different shifts are happening. And so as these shifts happen, our hormones are constantly fluctuating. We have a surge of estrogen after our period, and that has its own function in place. It peaks at around ovulation. That shapes how we function at that time. After we ovulate, we start to make progesterone that has a very different function and how it supports our bodies. And then when we menstruate, all of our hormones come down to their lowest levels. And so, depending on the ratios of these different varying levels of primarily estrogen and progesterone, but we're also impacted by a surge of testosterone that we get before we ovulate and other hormones. They actually really activate certain parts of our brain and body to function differently. So, for example, we'll start with menstruating. So, if you were to count the days of your menstrual cycle, day one is the day that you first start to have a menstrual flow, right? And you need to use some kind of period product. So, at this point, all of your hormones are at their lowest level. And this is when your cross brain communication is at its peak, meaning that your left side and right side of the brain are really communicating more effortlessly and more effectively than other sides of the month or other times of the month. Sometimes of the month, we might be a little bit more right brain dominant. We might be a little bit more left brain dominant at other times. But when we menstruate, there is neither the dominating of the right side of the brain or the left side of the brain. So a lot of times people describe that as like you're not too much in the facts and you're not too much in your feelings.
Mhm.
You're able to kind of look at a situation in the balance of the two. And the part of our brain that's connected to intuition is highly active at this time. And so when people talk about either feeling emotional or introspective or really deeply intuitive, that's connected to a real part of the brain that is really more active when we menstruate. And then when we move into our follicular phase, when we're starting to mature a new egg for the following month's ovulation, this is a time when estrogen starts to rise and the brain is actually really primed towards novelty and liking new things. Also, our short-term memory is improved, so it's a great time to learn complex tasks. So if you were a student, this would be a really great time to take on really intense study because your memory is actually boosted. Your short-term memory is boosted. If you're a businesswoman and you're needing to tap into a new software or learn a new system or structure, this is a time when your brain is really primed for you to learn new things really well, and it's going to be easier than other times of the month. If you're a dancer, like I know you are, this is a time where learning intricate new movements or starting a new style of dance is also going to be very satisfying. It's like going to be a really satisfying challenge for the brain. And then as we move towards ovulation, now if you think about it, ovulating, right? You're releasing an egg. This is an ideal time to conceive, whether you want to or not is different, but your biology is primed for conception. So with that, your verbal center, the verbal center of your brain is at its peak. So speaking is really effortless. Communication is really effortless. You have this heightened ability to communicate and express yourself, and there's going to be a lot of social drive. So if you know when you're ovulating, this is going to be a key time for your public presentations, filming content. Your skin is even glowing more generally because of the estrogen levels. It affects like the elasticity of your skin and the glow. So your ability to articulate yourself, express your thoughts, have meaningful conversations with people, have your mixers and your networking sessions. Ovulation is when all systems are driving you towards connection and being with another. Right, obviously biologically that has the context of fertility and seeking a mate, but that same energy we can use to be attractive to the things that we want in our life, right? The opportunities that we want. It's a great time to ask for a raise if you're working for someone else. It's a great time to hire new team members because you're able to connect on a really deep level, and your social nervous system is really very active and engaged at that time. Now, when you leave that ovulatory phase and you start to feel this shift where you're wanting to turn more inwards, the part of your brain that really likes closure, completion, and organization is really active. And so if you find that you're just wanting to like get your space, your office, your laptop in order, or if you find like you want to just complete your projects, like clear out time and get things done, the part of your brain that is really primed towards organization and completion is very active at this time. And I really get frustrated with this. So this is your luteal phase, right? Which is the time between ovulation and when menstruation starts again. And it is so frustrating when we reduce this time as to my PMS week or my PMS time. And even we have apps, period tracking apps, that will literally label this beautiful time in our menstrual cycle as your PMS week. You know, it's almost like just sign up for moodiness, bloating, tender breasts, whatever symptom we associate with PMS. It's almost like, here's your ticket, come to the show. Like, this is almost what you should expect without without any real conversation of why you might experience PMS and what you can do to alleviate that. And really what PMS shows us is that there has been a mismatch of our estrogen and progesterone levels throughout the month. And it really comes to a head when we're in that week leading up to the period. So if there's a hormonal imbalance, it really starts to show itself in that time. But another thing that I think is so important is that our resting blood sugar is lower. So can you imagine how you might feel if you're not feeding yourself more calories to account for the fact that your metabolism went up, your resting blood sugar is lower, and your resting cortisol or stress hormones are higher? So are we having PMS, or are we
out of balance, basically?
exactly. Or are we hangry, right? Are we not? Are we if we've normalized skipping meals, this becomes a time where it really is non-negotiable. Like your body actually needs more calories. Your body actually needs
Chantal,
more rest.
can I, first of all, this is amazing. And I'm keeping like track in my mind because I want to restate some of what you said to make
Okay.
sure. I want to make sure that the audience gets it. And I want to make sure I'm getting it right.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is, so day one of your menstrual cycle is the day that you start to bleed. And from
Yes.
then, at that point, your hormones are pretty much even. And you said we can do, just taking into account, I love that you said we're not little men, we're women,
Mm-hmm.
and we can
Mm-hmm.
use this to our advantage. So this is a period where a lot of like complex learning, and then as the estrogen starts to rise, we are also primed to, we want novelty, stimulation, learning new things, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
that period when you're starting from when your period starts going up to ovulation, right?
Yep. So as that estrogen starting to uptick. So when we menstruate, all the hormones are at their lowest. So this is more the
Mhm.
time for like introspection, intuition, journaling. And then as we're ending the bleeding phase, we're going to start to feel that estrogen pick up and those short-term memory boost, that love of novelty. Yes. So that's follicular phase going up towards ovulation.
Up to ovulation. Okay. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's when estrogen peaks. And then at
Peaks.
that point of ovulation is when progesterone starts to increase,
Mm-hmm.
going
After we've released the egg. Yep.
after we release the egg. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're getting into the luteal phase where we're starting to get back to day one of like bleeding.
We're getting closer to it. So that's when the organizational like completion. So you have to consider progesterone as progestation, right? This
Uh-huh.
is the hormone that protects your body in the event that you're pregnant. So it's a very protective time. It's a time of intense boundaries. Like, look, I said no, and that's what I meant. And you're still pushing, and you're probably going to feel the wrath, that comes with it. It's a very protective time. And like you and myself, like when you're pregnant, there's an energy of protectiveness. Like, I have to protect this. So there is a period of time where your body does not yet know if you're pregnant or not, right? You've released an egg, and when that progesterone is released, it's so protective that you have to protect your boundaries, your self-care, your space, your mental peace it needs to be fiercely protected in that time, which is the luteal phase. And then, like you said, that takes us into when our bleed starts again.
So you also see, I mean, that is just so powerful as well in terms of the boundaries. And also, what I heard is that is part of our feminine power. That is
Mm-hmm.
part of our feminine energy, the power to procreate, the power to protect, the power to reflect, and also the power to learn. Like we have all of these different aspects of our feminine energy at different stages of our monthly cycle. And it sounds like before I interrupted you, and it just got so deep that I wanted to just pause and break it down again. But you were going into quote PMS. And
Mm-hmm.
what I was hearing, and you can continue, is that that's an opportunity to learn versus seeing it as this horrible thing that we go through as women. Sounds like you were
Yeah.
saying it's a chance to learn what we need for ourselves and our bodies.
Yeah. I mean, if you know just that piece of information, that you have ovulated, you're making progesterone, your metabolism has increased. So literally, when people track their temperature, their basal body temperature on a daily basis, if a person is tracking their fertility, you can actually see the jump in your resting body temperature after you've ovulated. And so you have this creation of heat. It's the metabolism, right? Your metabolism is literally faster. And so if we just sit with that for a little bit, like, wow, my body needs more food and more rest right now. How am I responding to that so that I'm not moody, so that I'm not bloated, so that I'm not having these like, mood swings and just blowing up at people. It's a time of boundary setting that's really important. If you just understand the physiology, then it makes so much more sense to not doubt yourself when you're like, man, I'm hungry. or man, I'm having a craving, or like I've been doing these smoothies for breakfast, but it's not cutting it this week for me. If we know that there's some science behind that, then it gives us more permission to lean into that and to just honor that instead of doubting, like, well, maybe I'm just being greedy, or I really, I want to get up and go exercise, but my body is just feeling really tired. So you have that opportunity. When you have the information, you have an opportunity. Am I going to override that? Or am I going to yield and know that that's also part of the entirety of the cycle? There's no piece of land that can consistently produce. There's no process that can just produce without end. There has to be a time of rest. There has to be a time of reflection, planning, growing, harvesting, and then, and letting the earth be fallow. So this idea that we have to keep maintaining the same schedule every single day of the month, it may work well for men, but it doesn't work well for females.
All right. So, what are some of the specific things that women need to be mindful of in that premenstrual phase that everyone's labeling PMS, but now we're seeing
Mhm.
actually an opportunity to do other things?
Yeah, I think the main priority is, metabolically, it's estimated that we need almost 300 more calories a day. And so if you find that you're having cravings, instead of just grabbing what's available, really pause and check in. Am I nourishing myself adequately? Am I feeding myself well enough? Am I starting my day with a protein rich, um, healthy fat filled breakfast that's going to keep my blood sugar and my mood stable throughout the day? I think is a really important part to focus on. Also, being mindful of the intensity of your activity. This is not a great time to be really intensely working with like high impact cardio, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a time where our body is doing so much. And when we're sweating, we're losing some minerals. We're losing some of those key minerals that we need to build blood and to initiate our menstruation. And so I would say shifting towards more strength training is really great at this time.
Mm-hmm.
More lifting, or resistance, things where you're
Core
building. Yeah,
building.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Pilates, people like Pilates in the luteal phase as well. So switching the exercise so it's not so much high intensity and burning, but more building. And then also when it comes to relationships, really being mindful of overscheduling a lot of socialization, because it's a time where your brain and your nervous system aren't as primed for a lot of socialization, a lot of conversation, and a lot of engagement. I was just
Mm-hmm.
listening to a doctor say the other day, she was telling husbands, if you want to have a conversation with your wife, like, don't do it in the luteal phase.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a much more communicative and available partner for problem solving, for
Mm-hmm.
conflict resolution, if you have those conversations around the time of ovulation, leading up to and closer to ovulation. And so, and for for partners to have that information, we first have to have that information. We
Yes.
first have to be tracking where we are and having enough self-awareness to be like, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have the capacity for this conversation right now. If
Mm-hmm.
you can give me some time to really sit with it and reflect on it, and after my period, we can revisit this conversation and talk about it. That's one of the ways that we can set healthy boundaries at this time. And the other issue
Yes. Mm-hmm.
with PMS, I would just say is really that blood sugar balance and that stress management really key. If your cortisol levels are naturally going to be higher, you really have to be protective of um, what activities are going to take more from you than you have to give.
Yes, I think you had started to say earlier too about skipping meals, and that is
Mm-hmm.
one of my pet peeves. So many of the women that I work with look at eating and meals and breakfast in particular as
A
sort of
chore.
a chore, or even it's not even a second thought. It's like the third, fourth, fifth. It's so outside of
Mm.
awareness where, and I'm asking myself, like, how did we get to the point that basic nourishment of yourself becomes so, it's something, it's like expendable, like, take it
Mhm.
or leave it if I do it. And for you to break down the impact that this has on our hormones, on our blood sugar levels, which is why in the US there's such an epidemic of these metabolic syndromes. Like everyone is either pre-diabetic or hypertension, or
PCOS
somehow.
even is metabolic.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And
Mhm.
it's easier to medicalize these things, create industries and around diagnoses, than to go back to this basic understanding of our bodies.
Mhm.
And so I love that you're talking about the blood sugar and the cortisol and the stress hormones, and how something as simple as eating a consistent protein, healthy fat breakfast consistently could like probably knock out a lot of these symptoms.
It really can. I mean, if you think about it, before you send your children out for a day, you wouldn't dare send them out with no breakfast. You wouldn't, because you
Yeah,
already know you're setting them up for the meltdowns and the tantrums and the breakdowns,
the
because
moodiness
it's
and
the most essential thing that we need is fuel. And I think there are a couple of things at play. One, this prioritizing feeding others and giving to others and not seeing ourselves also as worthy of receiving,
mhm.
that's something I'm wondering, like how you can, like people are really feeding their families and just not feeding themselves. They really are
Yes.
doing that. And how are you not as valuable as the people you love in your life to start your
Mhm.
day with a filling meal? um, on a hormonal level. So the two key hormones that drive all other hormonal production is insulin and cortisol, right? Insulin
Mhm.
has to do with your blood sugar management, and cortisol has to do with your stress. And so if you're having any hormonal issue of any sort, you cannot bypass the impact that
Insulin.
stable blood sugar and stress management has. And part of stress
Mhm.
management is also rest. So before we get
Yes.
into what supplement I need to take for this condition, we do so much pathologizing of all of these conditions, and we think they're so unique, but fundamentally all hormones need food. You need
And
fuel
rest.
and rest.
Yes.
It's not the most romantic thing ever. You probably would much rather someone sell you a product or a
Mhm.
diet or a process, but just the simplicity of just feeding yourself on a regular basis. And so what I find is a lot of women are saying, well, I'm not hungry. And that's a stress response. You wake up and you're not hungry, you are running on adrenaline, you are running on
Mhm.
stress hormones. This is not something to take pride in, nor is it something to ignore.
Yeah.
We take
Yes.
a lot of pride in, like, oh, I don't need to eat. Like, eating is so lowly. Like, who does that, you know?
Low
So
vibrational.
I
Who's
know,
eating these
who needs to
days?
eat? We need to just be like surviving on sunlight and air. And I think also what has been problematic is this conversation around intermittent fasting. So women
Yes.
who already don't have a habit of feeding themselves find justification in saying, well, I'm intermittent fasting.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about intermittent fasting is that most of the research that speaks about their benefits are for the male body or for postmenopausal women, because after
Mm.
menopause, you don't have this menstrual cycle happening anymore.
Yes.
And so, for those cases, yes, you may see some of those benefits. And there is a place for selective fasting, right? Obviously, we fast for other reasons, also spiritual reasons. It's not only
Yes.
about metabolism and weight loss or what have you. So I just really think we have to be mindful if we're just looking for excuses to justify not feeding ourselves, you know, or if we're willing
We
to
see that a
confront
lot with eating disorders.
that.
Mhm. With the latest fad, whether it's it not that every way of eating is a fad, but like when a person has covert eating disorder, it's like, I'm gonna do intermittent fasting, I'm gonna be a vegan, I'm gonna do keto, it's like you're latching on to a title or a structure that kind of subverts the fact that you're dealing with some other eating disorder things that could be really, really dangerous. Sorry, that's
Yeah.
my psychologist hat coming in, but
No,
like
no, and
we're
it's
always,
so
yeah.
It's so on point. And I think also what comes with that is like your body is designed to nourish another life. So for your body to function well, you actually have to be nourished.
Yes, yes. So you are giving permission to all women to eat. What did they used to say? Eat your Wheaties, right? Eat consistently. There's no pride in not being hungry. Actually, when I'm working out and I'm in my very consistent routine, I feel the hunger coming on and I love it because it's like, all right, this is my body saying you will not ignore me. And it's like you have to up your calories when you're exercising, and just even hearing now as you're coming in that luteal phase, you need, did you say 300, potentially 300 more calories
More
per day?
calories a day.
Okay. Hear that, ladies. Okay. There's nothing wrong with actually, we starve ourselves, and that makes us, the stress hormones increase, that makes us retain more fat. So even from a quote weight loss perspective, this way of like starving ourselves and running ourselves into the ground, it does not promote weight loss. But what you're saying is it's like if we could get those calories, get that rest, we could eliminate a lot of this moodiness and all of this stuff that we associate negatively with our menstrual cycle.
Definitely, because you have
Wow.
more, when there's more hormonal balance and there's more like predictability and like, yes, I can access meals on a regular basis. Then your
Mm-hmm.
body doesn't have to hold on to that fat. Like, I don't know when my next meal is coming. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if she's going to feed me today or not. And so your body can actually let go of that instead of holding on to that fat just in case. And then the last thing I would say is really important in the luteal phase is eliminating bowel elimination on a regular basis. If you
Mm-hmm.
are not
Mm-hmm.
moving your bowels on a daily basis, no amount of hormonal balance is going to come if the waste is not exiting. And so I think that's something we don't talk about because it's not fancy, it's
Mm-hmm.
not cute to
It's
talk
not
about
cute.
your
Yeah.
bowel movements. But the reality
Yeah.
is if you're not eliminating the hormones that you've made and used, they're going to recirculate in your body, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have your estrogen dominance and your all of the symptoms that come with that: heavy bleeding, clotting, cramping. You're going to have, like you have tendencies towards the PCOS and endometriosis and fibroids. So all of the things we know we want to avoid, we start to address them by getting to the root of feeding ourselves, resting, managing our stress. And that's why I'm so passionate about us teaching our girls this from the beginning. One, us
Yeah.
modeling it, whether these are our biological daughters or our nieces or our community nieces or our
Our
little
community
sisters.
needs to. Mm-hmm.
I am so passionate about us. We first need to get in right relationship with our bodies and our menstrual cycles and our period and our womanhood so that we can model that for the generation that's coming. Because otherwise, we're setting a template for them to follow these same self-sabotaging habits where we don't
Yes.
feed ourselves and we don't care for ourselves and we want to know how much we
You're
can
burnt
do
out.
with less sleep. Everyone's trying to hack. How little sleep can I get by with? Like,
Yeah.
it's really sad that we don't think we're worth rest and food and just, basic
Mm-hmm.
self-care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So this work is really breaking generational trauma patterns because, we all know that for, the history of people of African descent, there's been oppression and like having to be a superhuman in many environments. But what we're saying is, and what I hear you saying loud and clear is like, rest is so radical. Like sitting your butt down and doing nothing, reading, sleeping, not running around, telling everybody no. You said there's that period where it's important to set the boundaries because we need to be introspective, we need to be reflective, and we need to be restful. I hope you guys are hearing this because I think to me, it's life changing. And I just wanted to share a little bit about how Chantal helped me personally. I mean, we've done work together, what we've created a course and content together, and we have collaborated for a long time. But I also consulted with her around menstrual health and using womb steaming as one of the tools, along with diet. And you helped me, you encouraged my love of bubble tea because it has the tapioca, this the slippery, right? And what
Mhm.
is that? You said that's good when you're in the follicular phase or when you're.
Generally, it's a very tapioca is very stretching. It's very cooling. So if you have
Hmm.
heat symptoms in the body, if you have tendencies around like hot flashes and night sweats or vaginal
Hmm.
dryness, boba, anything, okra, anything that's really slippery and stretchy and gelatinous is going to have a cooling effect on the body as well as a
Okay.
lubricating effect on the body.
Okay. So I've already was like, I was a boba fan. So when you told
Same.
me, yes, that was on one of the lists of foods. But you really did a thorough assessment of me and my cycle and like just everything from the length to the heaviness to the color to whether or not the consistency, whether or not there's clots, and looking at foods and lifestyle, but also using the tool of womb steaming, vaginal steaming with herbs and the steam and the hot, the heat to really help. That was like the icing on top of the cake that really regulated my period to where it's not even a thing, right? Like I do my rest. Day 2 or 3, I'll have a heating pad just to kind of like soothe and keep the flow going and just making sure it's also making sure that I just lay down and rest. But I don't experience my period as this like horrible thing. It's like I look forward to it, and I attribute so much of that to my work with you, Chantal. So I think it's just for people to know that there's there's information and awareness, and then there's actually things that you can do to help, even if you're like, because my period wasn't really horrible, and I think you had said something too, like after I had my kids, it kind of got pretty regulated. And you were like, sometimes once you give birth, it kind of like resets the uterus. So it wasn't this horrible thing, but just working with you made it like 100% just, yes, this is something as in my experience as a woman that I don't dread and that I feel good about, that it's a part of who I am.
And what's so exciting for me is that that's more capacity, energy, and presence you have to do the very important work that you do in the world, right? And then on top of it is you're raising daughters. And that gets normalized in your household as this is a time for rest and honoring this important life-giving process that every woman has endured and experienced, and it's credited for our existence. So why shouldn't it be treated with sanctity? Why shouldn't it be treated with honor and reverence? And so that's really what I envision and would love to see is more mothers taking on this renewed and revived and really healed relationship with their period, so we get to just clear the slate of all the trauma and all the shame and all the
Mhm.
ignorance, just clear the whole slate and bring the next generation of young women into this enlightened understanding. So when I see it happening, it really is it's so exciting. It's so humbling at the same time to imagine that there are going to be generations of girls that don't have to go through what many of us went through.
Yes, yes. So why don't you tell us about your book? I mean, I know about it, but why don't you tell the listeners about your book and that contribution to like making the shift for women and girls?
So it was really clear to me as I started working with women privately in consultations. And so as I started to offer womb steaming as a self-care practice, when I learned about it, I was just like, okay, I know medical, I know I have a background in nursing, I have a background in environmental engineering. And there was something that really fused the two when I learned about womb steaming. I'm like, this is so efficient. It's such a quick way to see results,
It
and I love
cleans out the
efficiency.
tubes. Yeah.
You know, like it does so much with so little. It's not invasive. It's not speculums and examinations and investigations. It's such a gentle way of women's medicine that we've known for so long, and that we've passed, like we've forgotten along the way. Obviously, we've been interrupted by other agendas and colonization and enslavement. So we have a lot of disrupted cultural practices across the board. And so that was my initial interest in steaming, was like something so simple and enjoyable that will give women less period pain and help them recover quicker after birth. It was like a no-brainer. Of course I want to revive this. Why wouldn't I want to? Because women are already doing so many amazing things in spite of really struggling with their menstrual health. So I'm just like, okay, if we take that struggle and that pain and that drama off the table, then we just get to turn up and amplify your light and your work in the world. And who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so as I started working with women, though, I was realizing there were so many like basic educational components that were missing. Women were not understanding their period. They were seeing fertile cervical mucus when they ovulate, which is a very healthy sign, and telling me, I think I have an infection because I have all this discharge. It's like, well, this is cervical mucus. This is what facilitates conception. And
Yeah.
and these are women who are mothers and married, and you don't know that this is telling you you're fertile, that this is a window of opportunity that you're going to be more likely to conceive. So I realized there was just basic information women were not knowing. And so I started to teach them. And I was like, we're just starting too late. Like it's too, I mean, it's the timing that it's supposed to be for the individual, but collectively, we shouldn't be learning this in our 30s and 40s. You know, we should be embracing our first period with the understanding that it's meant to be pain-free, peaceful, effortless, restorative, rejuvenating, and that should be the foundation of the conversation. And so it was really clear to me that I have to write a book for teens. We have to start this conversation so much sooner. And even though the book says it's for teens, it really is for every woman every menstruating female who is wanting to understand the beauty of their design. It's a beautiful design, and I hate that it's so slandered, and there's such a negative kind of smear campaign about menstruation and periods. We're made to think it's a disgusting, filthy thing that we have to hide and conceal and medicate and wish away, and that it's not necessary, but it is the very life-bringing activity. We would not be here if our grandmothers,
as a human race,
we all have been bleeding. You know, bleeding women have birthed the sinners and the saints. You know, like everybody here has come out of the vagina of a bleeding, menstruating woman, and we really need to restore our estimation of how sacred and honorable and noble that process is. And so that's what I feel like. I've often said the book is like my prayer in 139 words for all of us, you know, like or 139 pages, like this prayer that I have for all of us to experience the life-giving vitality, order, and gifts that menstruation and the menstrual cycle have to offer us on a monthly basis, and giving that to our daughters, our nieces, our community, and to ourselves. And I do feel like even our elders heal when they see this shift happening, when they see girls not having to be as ignorant, ashamed, or traumatized by their periods as they were.
Wow. So I'm putting up the website where, tell us about, like, the book is available for pre-order, right? And it's officially out September 20th.
Yes. Yep. So
And it's
available.
Okay.
Yep. There's actually two. So there's Peaceful Periods. It's going to be Honored Womb with the ED. .com. You can pre-order it there, and then we also have peaceful-periods.com. So both sites is where you can pre-order the book. And really exciting right now, pre-order is available in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, India, and Singapore. But once it's released with the final launch, it'll be available worldwide. And so if you pre-order, you get to join our private community. For like, I have a private membership where I teach live classes and have live Q&A sessions. Yep, once a month you are. And so you get to join for 1 month for free. when you pre-order the book, and we're having a virtual womb wellness retreat where we'll have speakers and guest presentations and basically a whole day of a womb wellness retreat from the comfort of your own home. And I'm really excited about inviting everyone for that. I'll just put it here in the chat. There's a dash in the middle.
Okay. See, I'm mixing everything up, and we have to make sure that you all get this. If I were you, I would pre order it so that you can be part of the community, because it's an ongoing journey. And that's what I find. That's like, there's information, but most of us, especially as women, we thrive in community. You even said that period, like around ovulation, we want to connect, and that is such a big part of who we are. Our femininity is that connection and that desire to nurture and be nurtured. And so I love the fact that not only are you giving the information in the book, but you're allowing people to be part of the community, because whoever starts to like adopt this lifestyle and make these changes is going to be, they're like, you are a trailblazer. You listening, watching, you are a trailblazer. You may be the first in your circle to learn to take this healthier stance towards your period, towards your menstrual cycle, towards yourself, and how you view yourself as a woman. So you want to be in community with other people. So I would highly suggest pre-ordering. My daughter has listened to your videos, and so she knows Auntie Chantal, and the little one too kind of listens because it's time for her to start learning too. So I'm just really, really excited. And I'm excited for how you mention boundaries because I am all about boundaries, and that there's actually a biological reason why we need to have healthy boundaries. And when we don't, we go into fight or flight because we feel like we are vulnerable, we're wide open, we're not protected. So boundaries really help to protect us. And sometimes we have to relearn how to establish and maintain healthy boundaries. So I don't know, Chantal, we could go on and on. Is there anything else that you want women to know? Any like key foods, anything that you want to leave people with?
I would say, like we said, definitely breakfast. Love yourself enough to feed yourself breakfast. Limit screen use after hours, or invest in blue light blocking glasses if you have to work on screens, tablets, phones. Really protect your rest. There is so much healing that comes from rest for your entire body and your mind. And it's there, self-care. We have our own definitions of self-care, but there is no self-care greater than feeding yourself and resting. And if you can protect those two, then downstream there is health and healing and flourishing nourishment, for everything that you come into contact with. So that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. I love it. I hope you all have enjoyed this interview, and you can find Chantal at www.peaceful-periods.com or www.honoredwomb.com. I'll put all of that in the description, show notes, and make sure you go out and get that book. Thank you so much, and I'm so glad that you could provide this information to my community.
Thank you. I'm so glad that your community has this information to benefit from.
All right. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.